Got an article from The Hill. It's called Why Men Are Leaving the Left and Not Coming Back. So it's by John McGillion or Gillion. The Democratic Party is hemorrhaging men. Across the U.S., they are leaving in waves. From the unions that once powered the party's muscle, from classrooms that once echoed with idealism, and from a movement that now talks at them rather than to them. Polls show young men flocking to the right in numbers not seen for generations. The trend isn't a blip, but a brutal reckoning, and no amount of branding or beer ads will stop it. The party's latest efforts to woo men are almost painful to watch. The Democratic National Committee has poured money into influencer partnerships, podcast cameos, and clumsy masculinity campaigns filmed in gyms. Spokespersons drone on about kitchen table issues, as if men are sitting there waiting to be emotionally validated between spoonfuls of reheated stew. None of it works because it isn't real. Men don't want to be sold to, they want to be spoken to. The problem isn't packaging, but posture. A party that has spent years pathologizing masculinity can expect gratitude from the men it has spent so long diagnosing. There was a time when Democrats didn't need to perform masculinity because they personified it. Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and John Kennedy all spoke the language of strength, duty, and sacrifice. Even Bill Clinton, for all his flaws, employed charisma as a form of command. Barack Obama combined intellect with authority. These were men who carried themselves with a quiet confidence that others respected because they aspired to it. But somewhere along the line, that current of conviction faded. The virtues that once defined Democratic leadership, resolve, discipline, fortitude, were recast as remnants of a primitive past. The same movement that once celebrated builders and breadwinners began to sneer at them. Masculinity became something to manage rather than to honor. The sermon grew stale. You are privileged. You are problematic. You are not welcome here anymore. That message has exhausted its power. The modern Democratic man, the one trending on social media, fluent in the language of lived experience, feels like less like a leader and more like a life coach. I'm just going to say Mayor Pete, speaks with the soothing detachment of a corporate wellness coach. Cory Booker dispenses compassion like a man who's been trapped on the seminar circuit too long. Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's ill-fated running mate in 2024, was less a spark than a screensaver, steady, silent, and impossible to remember once gone. They are not bad men, but they are beige ones. They speak softly while the world shouts. They offer community care when men want competition, competence, and consequence. They promise conversation in a culture crying out for courage. They mean well, but politics built on politeness never steers the blood. Meanwhile, Republicans, loud but unmistakably alive, speak in the tone of reality. President Trump, War Secretary Pete Hegseth, and White House advisor Stephen Miller may be coarse, but they speak with purpose. They treat the male instinct not as a disease, but as a drive. They talk about work, pride, duty, and protection. Things men recognize because they live them. They make politics sound like it has purpose again. Men don't need to agree with them to understand them. Democrats have mistaken attention for trust. They think a viral podcast clip can replace authenticity. They think a few relatable posts will fill the void left by decades of disdain. But men are not looking for content, they're looking for meaning. They are tired of being told what's wrong with them and desperate for someone to tell them what's right. A party that once built bridges now burns them. A movement that once fought for workers now fights for abstractions no one believes in. It wasn't always this disconnected. The Democratic Party once inspired men to see themselves as part of something greater. Families, unions, and a country worth defending. Today, however, the same party mocks faith, discipline, and fatherhood as punchlines. It worships inclusion, but forgets loyalty. It preaches equality, but forgets basic humanity. If Democrats truly want to win men back, they'll need more than consultants and hashtags. They'll need to rediscover their backbone. They'll have to speak about duty without apology, about strength without suspicion, and about ambition without shame. They'll have to rediscover that empathy without authority is just noise. They must remember that admiration cannot be outsourced, it must be earned. Until then, men will keep drifting right, not because they have changed, but because Democrats have. The party of Roosevelt and Kennedy has swapped metal for madness, common sense for the kind of nonsense only consultants applaud. It no longer commands respect because it no longer gives it. The irony is almost poetic. Democrats say they want to reconnect with men, yet every strategy they devise sounds like it was written by someone who's never met one. They've turned politics into therapy and wonder why men don't show up for the session. For all their algorithms and analytics, they've forgotten something simple. Men don't want to be managed, they want to be moved. And no amount of focus groups can teach a party how to speak to the soul. Quite the article. I would say, I agree that the Democrats need more than being all chummy with influencers and a lot of the other little weird stuff they're doing. I think it's like this. If the Democrats came out and were steadfast in their support for workers' rights, right, higher wages, paid family leave, they would come off more as authentic, as authoritative figures, and it's really just a matter of you have a party that they have spent a lot of time appealing to women, right? But they're going to keep losing men because they don't really feel like they need them. They thought if they just kept pushing in this fake feminist direction that it would be enough to win an election or win elections, and it has not been to their favor. Which is really sad, because it's like if you're a young guy, the Democrats, if they, again, were like half competent, really should be able to dissuade you from supporting the Republicans. If you're a young guy that goes to college, the Democrats, again, if they were a competent party, would be trying to either make schooling excessively cheaper or just free outright, whereas the Republicans don't believe in that. It's really sad that there are so many avenues for them to take to appeal to men, right, young men, and they're just incapable of it. I mean, when you see Hispanic voters supporting Trump over the Democrats, which have traditionally been, the party of, minorities, it's another like example of their failings, failing at communicating, at really giving anyone any actual desire to support them. It seems like the only group they can hold on to are African Americans, especially African American women, and that's mainly because so many of us are not like we might be discouraged with Democrats, right? Sick of them. We might even sit out a couple of elections, like as was the case in 2016. But we're not going to, like, you had Candace Owens talking about Brexit. We're never going to get to a point where most of us would just vote for Republicans because we know that they're trash too. We've seen the party switch, and we've seen the lack of concern even by the more recent members for anything having to do with actually supporting black people. The most you will hear from Trump is that he gave some money to some black schools and lowest black unemployment ever. And most of us, again, are savvy enough to not fall for that crap. But the fact that Trump was able to get, the largest share of black votes in, I think it was 20 years for any of the, the Republican presidential nominees, is still like a bigger symptom of the Democrats' failure to capture what used to be groups which were enthusiastic for them. And I'll keep saying this. I don't think Hillary, Biden or Harris were great candidates. I don't really see where any man would be like, oh man, I can't wait to go vote for Secretary Clinton. And it's not really about anyone's gender. It just comes down to the kind of campaign that you run, right? I'm with her was a stupid slogan that, again, is still mostly having to do with appealing to women versus just having something that could be considered universal. Like, there were plenty of women that voted in the primary for Bernie Sanders, and they don't vote for him because, oh my God, I'm so in love with, old men. No, it's because Sanders actually talked about workers' rights and, Green New Deal, free college, various things that affected people, that people felt an investment in. And when you don't stand for anything, a lot of younger guys will be able to weed that out. They'll go, yeah, this stinks. I'm gonna go over to Trump. See, at least with Trump, there's always the understanding that even if he's full of crap as well, because he's more blunt in his manner of speaking, it can come off as authentic, even if it's, you know, mostly stuff that is not going to help the very same people that he's trying to get the votes of. So I just think if the Democrats are serious about trying to get male voters back, get rid of these consultants, to hell with the influencers, actually like have candidates and politicians that talk about issues that affect young men. There are a lot of young men who are worried about, oh my God, how am I going to afford going to school? Oh my God, how am I going to afford getting a job? Or excuse me, how am I going to get a job, period? Because all these fake jobs and all the other, you know, artificial crap. But until they cross that bridge and allow themselves to specifically look at that group and say, hey, a young guy, right, who's like worried about his future, has no reason voting for the backwards party that's trying to take away everybody's rights, because these can affect you as well. They're not going to make any inroads. And it's sad. Because, you know, you can sit here and say all the young men are I-words and they hate women and all this other crap, but you're not doing yourself or women any favors by smearing an entire group, an entire demographic of people based off of a couple of votes every few years. So it's just unfortunate that they'll never get out of their own way, because that moneyed interest will allow. Like I said, Democrats are paid to lose. When Republicans are in control, they raise a whole bunch of money from these stupid fundraising emails, and they profit off of the suffering of regular people, as Republicans do as well. But the point is that when articles like this are written, they don't mention that there is a clear financial incentive for Democrats to basically allow these issues and these problems to go on year after year, decade after decade. And one of those issues is their willingness to avoid directly trying to appeal to young men, if it means being able to outrage and possibly extract coins from the various female voters that they have. It's some sick stuff, because the only people that are winning are these useless politicians.